All right, welcome to another episode of Book Drops. I am Don Boozer, the manager of the literature department and coordinator of the Ohio Center for the Book here at Cleveland Public Library.
And I'm Sarah Flynn. I am the manager of the Popular Library, where you can find books and DVDs, audiobooks and CDs.
All the greatest.
I know, releases. The first floor.
We are here today to talk about science fiction. So we would like to sort of expand your ideas on what science fiction can be, give you a little idea of the respectable lineage that science fiction comes from, and then give you some of our picks and favorites to continue the conversation on our little Book Drops show here. So I want to start out by giving an idea of the deep lineage of science fiction. I think a lot of people, at least, I don't know, Sarah and I have talked about this, and a lot of people sort of look down their nose at genre fiction and science fiction in particular and that sort of thing. And I think it's important to remember this genre goes back centuries. The one that I had wanted to mention was Lukian's A True Story from the 2nd century AD. We have interplanetary travel, we have aliens, we have, all kinds of weird civilizations, and it's all from the 2nd century AD. So we have science fiction going back well to the early part of the ADs. Another thing to keep in mind is Frankenstein. Frankenstein's sometimes thought of as a horror book, but it's also science fiction, one of the first science fiction. It was written in 1818, which just sort of blows my mind. That's sort of the paradigm of the mad scientist thing that started it all. And of course, we have Jules Verne and H.G. Wells writing in the late 19th century. We have things like all of those ones that are, I think people think of as more modern. Even whenever you think of H.G. Wells, you think of like War of the Worlds and the radio broadcast stuff. I mean, that's written in the 19th century, in the 1800s. So I mean, the stories go back years and centuries and more. Another thing that Sarah and I were talking about the other day whenever we were putting this together is the whole idea of the different subgenres of science fiction. There are, let's say, tons of subgenres. Two that we were talking about between us were hard science fiction and soft science fiction. How would you define hard science fiction, Sarah?
What people think of science fiction when you say it. So space, aliens, travel, those kind of things.
Things that stick to the science and stick to the
right.
The hardware end of things.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's the difference?
I would say soft is more sort of loose, and it's like it may be set on an alien world, or it may be, so it doesn't necessarily get into the hardware and it doesn't like make you learn physics and chemistry right. and that sort of thing. So right. Whereas the hard science fiction is going to make you think about the vicissitudes of space travel and time warps and that sort of thing.
And I think when people think about sci-fi and say, I don't read sci-fi, right. They think about hard science fiction, where there's, as we're going to show, there's such a wide range now and many different subtypes.
And we came across the term speculative fiction as well, that it was sort of, I've seen bandied around, and we found out actually Robert Heinlein came up with the term in 1947. So that was one of those things that it's sort of the way that we understood it and looking at the resources was that it was a term that was used to sort of get away from the whole idea of the genre and the pulps. And, this is a more literary form of, science fiction. And we're going to call it speculative fiction because we're sort of making things up. So, but it's another one of those terms that I don't think people know it as well. I think then somebody's not going to come into the library looking for, well, excuse me, but where's your speculative fiction section?
No one is.
So we're sticking with sci-fi. We think it's a fine term. We are proud to be science fiction readers.
And so much.
There you go. So
it also gets lumped together with fantasy a lot, which is they're very different and different readers. And of course, fantasy has 20 different subtypes too.
Exactly.
So they're definitely different.
Exactly. And I think sometimes people almost see them as since you have some books that are, maybe it's sci-fi, maybe it's fantasy. I think it's like a catch-all term. It's like, well, we'll put it in the sci-fi fantasy fiction. That makes it easier for us to organize.
Right. So, but then you get like horror ones bleeding in, and you get mysteries bleeding in, and you could just,
Exactly. That's why we organize all our books in the literature department just by author. So.
It's very smart. It's hard to decide.
So we do have some disappointed patrons coming in from time to time looking for the sci-fi section. We're like, well, but we can help them find things.
Oh, yeah.
We're always
It's
happy to.
Easier than looking at every single book that comes in and deciding where to put
exactly. Because you're going to put one sticker on it. That's do away with the stickers. So that gives you an idea of sort of the lineage that we're talking here. We are, happy to be sci-fi readers, and I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and never apologize for your reading taste.
No.
So I think that's great. So we do have some picks and favorites that we would like to share with you as well. One of the things I think, and I'm sort of talking too much, so I apologize for that. but everybody, whenever you think of science fiction, I mean, the greats include Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, Roger Zelazny, who's actually from Ohio, and Andre Norton, who was a librarian here at the Cleveland Public Library.
Sweet.
She was a children's librarian. You got Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury. There's a whole list of iconic sci-fi authors that I think people think of, and we encourage you to read those, of course. But I think that we have some other selections here as well that we are maybe more well-known, and some that are maybe less well-known today.
So. We were going to start off. We have some that we both kind of are favorites of ours, and then we have each our own separate ones too. So one we had talked about when planning the show was Kurt Vonnegut, which my dad had a bookshelf that was probably like a quarter to a half Vonnegut. So I read all of them in high school, and they're this big, so, so that made it easy. Yeah. I read a lot of Vonnegut. So,
and he's one of those that's really hard to categorize too. He is one of those that just goes back and forth between genres, and you have different things going on. And there's political satire, and there's sci-fi, and there's just random things sometimes. It's just he's one of those authors that I think you either really like him or it's like you just don't.
This is not for me.
So you can read some, but Slaughterhouse-Five, of course, is that's people still read that in high school. Still, it's on every recommended reading list you ever see come out.
Yeah.
So we can't recommend Kurt Vonnegut highly. If you don't like him, that's okay. Hey. There's a lot of other ones to go by. So we were looking for others that we had sort of shared, and another one that we had was Michael Crichton. And oddly enough, as we were putting this together, I found a review of Slaughterhouse-Five written by Michael Crichton, which that sort of surprised us, as a matter of fact. So Michael Crichton was a fan of Kurt Vonnegut. It's an odd review. Did you read the review?
I did. Yeah.
I couldn't decide whether he liked it or he didn't in place. I'm like, he really liked. Oh, wait a minute, maybe he didn't. I'm not. So it read like a Kurt Vonnegut novel. I don't really know where it's going. So, but we thought it was interesting with that connection between Crichton and Vonnegut. But Michael Crichton is probably best known right now for the Jurassic Park movies, but I think the book was better.
The book was excellent. So if you haven't read the book, pick it up. Fast paced, excellent.
Exactly, and that's sort of the difference. One of the differences between Crichton and Vonnegut is that Crichton is a page turner. I mean, it is you just rip through his, and with Vonnegut you're reading along, and then you sort of come to sections that are like, what?
Yeah.
So it makes you think, but Michael Crichton is a craftsman with the writing, and just keeps the pages flipping, man. From one chapter to the next,
I remember reading Timeline when it came out, and which is a terrible movie adaptation, by the way, while we're talking about that. But same thing.
That seems to be a theme in some of these things too.
I know, whether it's terrible adaptation, but really, really good book. Page turner. Fantastic.
Yeah. And the thing with Crichton too, I think Crichton also maybe bleeds a little bit more into the hard science fiction sometimes too, because he takes the science seriously. Mm-hmm. He tries to explain how things are working without going into the nuts and bolts. But you read these things and it's like, okay, that seems maybe plausible. It's like, you could take DNA from a bug in amber. Okay. But that's one of the interesting things. It's about the page turner, and he respects the science whenever he uses it. So
it's a good blend.
Exactly. And then another one that we wanted to share mutually is
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. So this is a strange one because it's just hilarious. It is, you can't explain it, just pick it up and try it.
Pour yourself a Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster.
Please do. Grab your towel.
Grab a towel, and then you're good to go.
Once you read it, you'll get in with all of the nerd jokes.
And the thing with Douglas Adams is he died so young, and I mean the volumes of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's basically his, major work
Legacy.
right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So yeah, but I think it's also been an inspiration to a lot of other authors too. I think a lot of other authors have tried to write, some humorous science fiction, probably look back to Douglas Adams too, and use that as an inspiration.
And I think it's something, if you're not familiar with science fiction, you don't really know that there is humorous science fiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And the complete opposite of humorous science fiction
is what we're going into next. So when we were talking about our favorites and kind of going through, we found a lot of similarities. So we're each going to share a pick from some different subgenres. So the first one is military sci-fi. And it so happened a lot of our picks lined up.
Yeah.
So strangely enough.
Hey, I got one like that.
So my first I'd say after I read Vonnegut, after I read Douglas Adams, this was maybe my next foray into sci-fi. So this is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. And this is pretty classic. Children, we are in a war with the Formics, which are like insect aliens, and we know they're going to come. We're going to have another conflict with them. So we train children at a military facility. And they get put into like simulations, like battle simulations, and they pit them against each other. It's really brutal, and see which children come out on top and have the best battle plans. So you could be like 8, 10, and trying to like command these battle plans. So there are a lot of books to it. You get introduced to the characters in this one, and then they kind of split off. One of my favorite one is the one with Bean, who is my favorite character. And he splits off into Ender's Shadow. So that's one of the other ones I really love, but I probably read 5 of them. Yeah, so that's my military sci-fi pick.
There you go. That's if you read 5 of them, that's a selling point right there.
Yeah, if you watch Star Wars for like the big battles, this is your guy right here.
There's your connection. Okay. So my military fiction is Old Man's War by John Scalzi. John Scalzi actually lives down around in Southwest Ohio, as a matter of fact. The problem with talking about Old Man's War is you can't talk about it that much without giving all the spoilers. So you should just read it. But the whole idea is that whenever people get old, they can join the Colonial Defense Forces and fight in battles off of Earth. One of the things that they have to do is sign a contract that they will never return to Earth, though. And all of that is explained in the first few chapters, and then it just jumps into the action. One of the great things about John Scalzi is that his writing includes both just the sci-fi elements, but it is just laugh out loud funny sometimes too. So the thing with this one is it's also the first in a series as well. So if you like the universe, there are a number of other books that feed into the universe, but like I said, you just can't talk about this one without giving the spoilers away. So I'm not going to give any spoilers away. That's sort of our unspoken code here at
definitely.
Book Drop. So
and you have to talk about Red Shirts because that's a standalone. It's fantastic.
Yes. Red Shirts is also another John Scalzi book. It's a standalone novel. The whole premise of that is that, for those of you who don't know, in Star Trek, if Kirk, Spock, and somebody in a red shirt goes down to the planet, the person in the red shirt's not coming back.
They're done.
So the whole idea of red shirts is that there's this alternate universe that is somehow connected to our world. And whenever it's not Star Trek, as licensing franchise problems. But anyway, there's a TV show where the red shirts get and in the alternate universe, this happens for real, and they can't understand what happens. Every time there's a guy in a red shirt, he's gone, and there's these horrible accidents happen out of the blue, and so the whole idea is, how can they stop this? And then they find out that they're somehow connected with this other universe, and it just goes from there. But it's hilarious, and it's just a really fun, quick read. Another page turner, I think. Scalzi writes the page turners.
I agree.
So
Crichton-like.
It's a Crichton-like there. There you go. Exactly.
Just made that up.
Crichton-like. So John Scalzi, you can't go wrong. He also just came out with a new trilogy, so I recommend that one too, The Interdependency. So pick up John Scalzi and support your Ohio authors.
Have you read Interdependency yet?
I did, all 3 of them. Yep.
And what was that?
Oh, it was good. It's the whole idea is that there is a galaxy-spanning empire, and there are streams in the space-time continuum where you can go from one colony to another, but the avenues are collapsing. They're collapsing. So they need to figure out how they're going to save their empires.
Nice.
And chaos ensues.
And good thing about sci-fi is there's usually series, so you can just keep
There's
reading.
at least 3 of us.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Our next category is Mars-based, which we both had one for. I know. And I had talked earlier about Andy Weir and Project Hail Mary, which is his newest book, which I loved. And I'm going to flip it back to The Martian, which is his first book. It's a little shiny here. If you haven't seen the Matt Damon movie, go read this, then watch the movie because it's a great adaptation. Mark is on an expedition to Mars, and they're taking samples, doing sciencey stuff, and there's a dust storm, and all of the crew is trying to get back to the lander, and everyone gets back except Mark, and they take off. They think he got swept away. They take off without him, with most of the supplies. So he is left on Mars and doesn't have enough food to last, doesn't have a way to communicate with Earth because they didn't think they didn't plan for that, and his crew is gone, and he has to science out how to survive, which is fantastic and a theme in his other books too. It's just great. It is sciencey, but not in the way where you're put off by it, and you just learn so much. It does not. The story it's great paced, funny too. So same as it has like really funny things. He rummages through everyone's stuff. They kind of had this little, like a tent type thing. And one of the running jokes is the commander, she loved disco music, so she only left like disco music. And he was so pissed. He was like, I never want to listen to disco again, because all he had to entertain himself was whatever everyone had on like their laptops. So excellent read, excellent movie.
I will ask, I did see the movie. I have not read the book. How would you compare the movie to the book?
Similar. And I read it, I'm trying to think, there was a little bit of a span when I read it and saw the movie. So I don't think it was as fresh to pick
Fair
out
enough.
all the differences, but close enough where I wasn't screaming at the movie while it was going on.
As one is wont to do on other movies. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
So excellent. Andy Weir, highly recommend him.
Very cool. You have I still like the fact that you can use science as a verb. I think that's it. Science is a way out of it. That's just awesome.
Because if I got stuck on Mars, I would just die. Yes,
as quickly as possible. Absolutely, yeah.
He has the actual science skills.
That's awesome. So my Mars-based books are the Mars novels by Edgar Rice Burroughs. This is the first one, A Princess of Mars, and the cover is actually based on the Marvel Comics series that they did with that. This also goes back to our whole idea of the lineage of science fiction. So the Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote these back in the early 1900s, from 1912 to 1948. They were originally in pulp magazines, and then they were published as standalone novels. Now, I will admit, since these were written in the early 1900s, some of it has not aged very well, and the whole damsel in distress plot can get a little tiring. But there's swashbuckling, there's aliens, there's John Carter, the main protagonist in most of the novels, is a Civil War veteran, and of course he's from Virginia, so he fought for the South. But he was transported somehow to Mars on March 5th, 1866. So there's enough dates in the books that you can sort of puzzle it out. He's like, it was a morning and then there was an evening. I'm nerdy enough that I went and I figured out that he was transported to Mars on March 5th, 1866. So if you want a Martian holiday, you can pick March 5th. But the adventures they're fun. They're an easy read, and like I said, they started out in the pulp magazines, so it was meant to be fast paced and move along and that sort of thing. So I think that the fact that they still stand up. Again, the movie was terrible. John Carter of Mars was just terrible. I was so disappointed. I first read these whenever I was in middle school, early high school, and I had waited, let's just say decades for the movie to come out. And I saw the visuals. The visuals are okay, but man, the movie was a disappointment. So don't judge the books by the movie. And again, keep in mind that they were from the early 1900s. So that's always a thing to keep in mind. But if you're looking for a swashbuckling adventure, the Edgar Rice Burroughs books are a lot of fun, and he's wrote he's also the one, of course, that wrote Tarzan. So if you know that character, let's say, he's responsible for that as well. So that's my Mars edition.
And we have some movie tie-ins, even though we're pretty much a lot of the ones we've talked about have movie tie-ins. My next one I was so impressed with, and picked it up. I'm trying to think. Somebody recommended it to me. And I thought, oh, this older, Star Wars book. I don't know. It's so good. So Star Wars Heir to the Empire. Look at that classic cover. You've got Han, you've got Leia. It's great. So it is set 5 years after Return of the Jedi. And it's kind of like, if you weren't as fond of the newer, like the path the newer ones took, this is the book for you, because they're kind of fresh off of that. Leia is pregnant with twins. She and Han are together. Luke goes off on his own. He has, things he's trying to accomplish. Han and, oh my gosh. I knew it. Han and Lando. I want to say Han and Chewbacca, but it wasn't. Han and Lando team up, and they're out in this space battle. And Leia and Chewbacca go and hide on Chewbacca's home planet, which I cannot pronounce. Lots of action, so exciting. The new villain is Thrawn, who takes over the Empire, the rest of the Imperial fleet, and he's kind of cobbling together whatever he can to kind of go up against them. And the interesting thing about having Thrawn as the villain in this is a trilogy, is if you watch The Mandalorian, the Ahsoka Tano episode, she says, well, I'm going to hunt Thrawn. And so if you read these, you know who he is and how terrifying he is. He's really a good villain, really smart and diabolical. So wow, another nerdy tie-in. So definitely these just kind of give you exactly what you want if you're a Star Wars fan.
And these are the ones that I remember correctly. Whenever they were talking about the sequels and stuff, everybody was hoping that these were the ones that they were making into the sequels.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. So just if you need that fix, this is your pick.
Okay. Yeah, I've thought about reading those for a while, and then it's I'm like you. I was like, Star Wars novel. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But now you've piqued my interest, so I can now add to my ongoing list of things that I need to read.
It's great. And if you like these three, then there's more just about Thrawn, that spinoff. I think that's another trilogy. So
very cool. Okay, so my movie tie-in. Finally, the movie appears to be coming out. We have Frank Herbert's Dune. Arrakis. This movie seems to have gone through so many iterations and so many delays and everything.
So long. Pandemic.
I just saw the new trailer recently, so I'm cautiously optimistic. But this is one book that I actually read back in high school, and I did not appreciate it at the time. It was one of those ones where everybody said, "Oh, you need to read Dune. You need to read Dune." One of my teachers recommended Dune. I was like, "Okay, I'll read it." One of the things I think that didn't confuse me, it sort of put me off at the time, was a lot of the dialogue is internal. So a lot of people will say things, and then there will be a section where what they're actually thinking. So there's this back and forth interior monologue sort of thing going on a lot. So it's like, yeah. And at the time I was a big Tolkien nerd, so everything was compared to the Lord of the Rings. So I'm like, okay. However, a few years ago, I read the first book, and then I read the second book, and then I read the third book, and they are absolutely amazing. The world building in Dune is at least comparable to what Tolkien did for Middle Earth. There is such a deep history that Frank Herbert pulls from for all the things that are going in. What led to the book that he's writing here that has appendices. If you like the Lord of the Rings appendices, this one has appendices too. So you have that at least going. But I would also would you consider Dune hard sci-fi or more of the?
I would, just with
the steel suits. And,
there's a lot of
thumpers and all that.
I would.
Okay, and so we're definitely talking some hardware here and things like that. So I think that the whole idea of, and then just the way that he talks about the spice and interstellar travel. And if I remember, I will admit it's been a while since I've read it, but what I remember is that they are not allowed to use computers. So everybody has to condition their mind to, and there's people who are designed to basically serve as computers and that sort of thing. And you have the navigators and the spicing guild and all that sort of thing. So,
and I was going to say, can't you, like a quick plot summary to try and...
Plot summary is that the House Atreides has been tasked with going to Arrakis, which is the Dune planet, one big desert on the planet, and they have been tasked with sort of bringing, order and everything to Arrakis. However, there is another house, House Harkonnen, that does not like House Atreides and comes in and just, let's say, messes things up. And Paul Atreides, the heir to the House Atreides, and his mother are basically cast out into the desert where they meet the and I'm never sure, is it Fremen or Freeman?
I think Fremen.
Fremen. Let's go with Fremen. The Fremen who live in the desert, they find them and they join forces with them, and it's just sort of a big battle to take revenge on House Harkonnen and see what happens from there. And weird things happen to Paul.
Definitely. And I will say I'm one of the few people who like the David Lynch version, which is very bizarre and people dislike for a lot of different reasons. I like it. There's if you just want a wacky sci-fi movie.
There you go.
And you want to prep for the movie coming up.
Wacky is a good way to talk about the David Lynch Dune movie. I will agree with that. Yes, I will say that the visuals in the
casting, the costumes,
really interesting.
Oh man, yeah, the visuals are great.
Yep, and the new one coming out, like I said, looks promising. Let's
Ooh, they can't miss.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
And then our last two are Ohio-based authors. And I didn't even know this when I was talking to Don about this, but my pick is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. And I did it on audio. You can see this is a teeny little book. I said to Don, it was 4 hours on audio. It just went so fast. There are books that come after this. It's a little novella. So maybe if you're just kind of getting used to sci-fi, excuse me.
And this is one of the subgenres, Afrofuturism?
Yes, sorry, my Afrofuturist sci-fi horror. So that's a mouthful. So in this one, Binti, she comes from the Himba people, and she's offered a place at a university, and lost my voice. She gets on a spaceship to go there, and it's attacked. And I will try not to give too much away. But it's, action, and I've really enjoyed it.
And it's a quick read, too, from what you said. It's like, and sometimes, and don't get down on the fact, don't think that it's a bad thing that it's a quick read, because then you can move on to your next read even faster. But if you really enjoy that and you can soak it up then in a short amount of time, and it really can resonate with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My local author is Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan and what is his name? Cliff Chang. Cliff Chang is the artist. Brian K. Vaughan is from Cleveland, and the book is actually set in a suburb of Cleveland as well. So it's set in Northeast Ohio. The story follows a group of girls who are paper delivery girls. However, they run into a problem with they're not aliens, there's time travel. There's also some nefarious forces at work. There are the fact that it's set in Northeast Ohio is kind of fun too, because it's set in a fictional suburb, but I mean, there's definitely some things you can recognize and that kind of stuff. And it's also being made into a series, into an Amazon TV series as well. So
and as well as one of his other ones. We were talking about, is it Why the Last Man?
Oh yes, Why the Last Man is also being made. And so it's Brian K. Vaughan time in TV land, evidently. So
yeah.
So support your Ohio, Northeast Ohio authors too. So.
And then we also had other picks which did not fit in this show, so we
get to do this again sometime.
We definitely do.
And we encourage people to share your if you're a sci-fi reader, or if you're even not a sci-fi reader and you're curious about what to read next, feel free to add some comments to the show. We'll be interested to see what other people's favorites are. We could only just scratch the surface of the genre that is science fiction in this one. So we encourage you to share your thoughts as well. And I I think we're almost out of time for another episode of Book Drop. So we're always afraid we're not going to have enough to do the half hour, but evidently we can. All right, for that, have a great day and happy reading.
Thank you.